everyone, it's January 20th, 2026, and I am Nick Valencia, host of Nick Valencia Live. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. It's a special day for me personally. January 20th was the day 5 years ago that I hit my rock bottom. I could laugh about it now, but it certainly wasn't funny back then. You know, I'm looking at this front door. It's the same front door that my wife walked out on me on all those years ago. And it took a lot of work to get where I'm at today, but today is 5 years without a drink for me. And so that's a pretty big deal, and it's a long time for people like me. So I'm pretty grateful to be here. I'm grateful for my higher power, grateful for the people in my life who have helped keep me sober and who, you know, stayed along as I got better. You know, we struggle from a disease of perception, alcoholics, addicts, you know, mental health ends up being a common thread for a lot of us. We talked about this a couple episodes ago when we had Aaron Parnas on, and just all the stuff that we see and how that impacts us on a daily basis. I drank because I liked the way it made me feel. And I know certainly the things that I was exposed to didn't help. I used to drink at things, people, places, and things. And now, you know, I try to live life on life's terms. It's not all Skittles and rainbows, and it's not, you know, shit, man. There's some days that I still crave a drink. Thankfully, I have the tools to know what to do, though. And so for all of you guys out there who are in recovery, you know, the best days of your life are ahead of you. I promise that if you do the work. So anyway, I wanted to say that. I just, you know, felt like talking about that because I can, because it's my show. Let's get into the news, right? And we start with some of our new reporting here out of Alligator Alcatraz. Yes, it is still open. Alligator Alcatraz, surprise to many. A lot of people thought that it shut down because of a judge's order, but it is under appeal right now. So it's open and it's still receiving pretrial detainees. And what we learned here, if you want to put it up on the screen, Eric, is breaking news that we put out this morning that Alligator Alcatraz is losing track of people and deporting them by mistake. It has happened, according to the whistleblower inside Alligator Alcatraz, countless times. We know specifics of at least 2 cases. In one of those cases, a man's surname was used. He had the same multiple surnames as another detainee, and he was transferred to the wrong facility, deported out of the country, rather. And then there was another inmate or detainee, rather, or somebody who had not been charged. Again, these are misdemeanors, not criminals. And this person was transferred to a facility. He was supposed to be sent to Arizona, and he was sent to the wrong state. The whistleblower, I asked, how many times has this happened? And they couldn't tell me. They said because the record keeping is that bad. Now, according to this whistleblower, leadership finally has made some changes. They're now going after or cataloging people in their system by alien number, A number, or by birth date. But if you could believe it, for months, they were deporting people based on last names, which is, you know, a recipe for disaster. And we've seen that continually happen there at Alligator Alcatraz. People are continuing to protest, show up, try to get it shut down. And yet we're still seeing things like this occur. So if you guys want to go read more about what our reporting is, go check out our Substack, nickvalencianews.com. Eric, were you trying to tell me something? I heard you a little bit in my ear. Oh, okay. Anyway, we move on here, and we're pivoting as well to Minnesota. One of the things I wanted to talk about, if you guys saw what happened to Don Lemon, it was on Sunday where he was invited by activists from the Racial Justice Network, and they had caught wind that one of the acting field directors for the ICE field office in St. Paul was also a pastor at a church, and they invited Don Lemon to join them. He went inside the church, and as the activists disrupted the service, he interviewed parishioners. He interviewed appeared to be one of the pastors there. And then he went outside and followed up, asked activists what they thought to what critics were saying that they shouldn't have done this. Anyway, after it was all said and done, the assistant attorney general, she spoke up about it and said that she was reaching out to the FBI to try to connect with them to see if there was potential criminal charges to be brought against the activist and potentially Don Lemon himself. He's taking it in stride, as you might imagine. You know, he's not used to, or he's used to this kind of pressure and this kind of attention, I'm sure. And so we saw just a short time ago, we're not going to play the clip, but someone sent it to me, President Donald Trump speaking in the White House briefing room, talking about what happened there on Sunday, throwing shade on Lemon and highlighting the criminal records of those activists. Conveniently enough, he forgot to leave his own criminal record. Didn't mention that. Anyway, so that's what's going on. Busy stuff, busy news cycle. And then the last thing I'll say is on Friday, I'll be heading out to Minnesota. Booked my ticket last week, and I'll be going out there this weekend, Friday through Sunday, to follow up with stories there on the ground. You'll see us live from Minnesota, broadcasting on all social media platforms, and really excited about doing that. So when we pivot to today and our guests, we've got a great lineup here, and actually one of my former colleagues here, somebody who is still on CNN, a legal analyst there, but he has a new book out here. If we could put it up on the screen, it's called 5 Bullets, and it talks about what went down in the 1980s on the subway. I was looking on YouTube to find a clip here, and here's a clip here I want to show you about what we're about to talk about. Bernie Getz, the vigilante here that Elliot Williams wrote a book about. Check it out.
Shootings occurred on the IRT southbound number 2 train, known as the Deuce, as it was approaching the Chambers Street station, a few blocks from City Hall. The wanted suspect is described as between 25 and 30, about 5'10", 150 to 160 pounds, thin build, golden blonde hair, and wearing glasses.
I think it was justified, and you know, after all, it was 4 against 1.
Nobody goes around shooting people. I mean, that can't be a good...
So that was just a brief clip from a local news report. Elliot Williams joins us now live on Nick Valencia Live. Thank you so much for taking the time, man. Really excited to talk about your book here.
So great to see you, brother. And more than any news or anything else, by God, what a beautiful thing you said at the top of the show about your sobriety and your feelings about where you are now. I mean, I think everybody out there has someone in their life who's touched by alcoholism or addiction, and having folks like you out there talking with vulnerability about your stories, something really important. So more important than my
book. I was
book.
an alcoholic, Elliot. I mean, sincerely, I always thought that definition, that movie definition, you know, the paper bag under the bridge, it's pretty successful in my life, got a lot done. But, you know, for me, like I mentioned at the top, it was a disease of perception. And, you know, I feel like at this point, I feel open enough to talk about it. It's not like I'm counting days at this point.
Yeah.
And it's the anniversary, you know?
Yeah, let me hijack the interview a little bit and just and pivot to the book and something a little poignant along those lines. You know, people would have seen you on television and not known what you were going through. By way, like in personal, my sister died when I did a CNN hit that night, right? And just sort of working through the grief, but was on television, you know, and it's only tied to the book because the book is dedicated to my sister. I didn't belabor it just as for Mitzi, and that's the dedication to the book. But you truly, at any point, do not know what battles people are fighting, and it's quite good for, I think, people to share their stories of their various pains and struggles. And so, you know, great work there.
I talk about this with my kids too. You know, it's like the never judge a book by its cover, right? And like how we judge our insides against people's outsides all the time.
Oh, that's a great way to put it. Yeah.
You know, and I have no idea what's going on in someone's head, and I can make it up, and I often do, and I future trip about all sorts of things. And, you know, now I have tools to be able to get through the hard days and hard moments.
That's great.
You know,
let's
talk about some hard times in New York, though.
Bernie
Getz, what is story? Why did you choose to write this book?
You know, I grew up with it and lived it. I was born in Brooklyn, grew up in New Jersey, just outside the city, literally wearing, and quite frankly, because you have me in focus, I'm in the studio. These are the New Jersey Nike Air Force Ones, literally the New Jersey models. The Jersey Got It is the name of it, or Jersey Made It. Anyway. So I grew up around it. It was formative for me. Stories that we grew up with as children really do stay in the backs of our brains. And then I just realized as an attorney, as a prosecutor, as a Black man, all of the above, a lot of the themes in the book keep coming up in America. Vigilante, how safe cities are. And if we're going to talk about Minneapolis, you know, there's a lot behind what's happening in Minneapolis, but a lot of it does come back to this notion of safety and sort of what the government has to do to make people feel safe, quote unquote, for reasons good and bad. And that, coupled with all these big name players today who got their start working on this case, from Al Sharpton to Rudy Giuliani to Rupert Murdoch, to the National Rifle Association, like what's old is new again with this case. And so I just wanted to dig into it.
So you brought up Minneapolis. I'm so grateful that you did. I wanted to show you, I was planning on showing you this video during the course of our interview because of the intersection with vigilantism. Did you see this video of this man, Eric, if you could bring it up there, that was basically holding down his block here with an assault rifle. This comes to us from Freedom News. He refused to give his name. He did say, though, that he's out because of what's happening in neighborhoods. I'd love for you to react to what you're seeing here. We're starting to see more of this. It's not just Republicans who are pro Second Amendment. And you saw that kind of similar reaction with Bernie Getz back in the 80s, celebrating him standing up and sort of protecting and standing his ground.
Yeah, and the interesting question is, so I've seen the video, and I will confess, I don't know so I've seen that clip, but just haven't been, and frankly, I've been in book promo mode for the last 36 hours and just haven't really dug into the news. And I actually don't know, and I don't want you to tell me, I don't know if he's defending himself against people who he believes are unlawfully present in the country, or if he's defending himself against ICE and the Border Patrol.
It's that part.
But the point is, we're at this point in America where, well, number one, he might lawfully be possessing that firearm, and that's a whole other story. And you can do that in this country. But we are at the point where we are quick to celebrate one's taking up arms for what he, in his own moral framing, decides is the public good.
Yeah, I mean, I think also one of the takeaways there is that people don't feel like they could trust ICE or trust the police because they're working with ICE. 287G programs, there's that intersection. Back to your book, though, you bring up the NRA and sort of how this was one of the flashpoints for that organization. Speak on that part.
Yeah, but so believe it or not, and I just say believe it or not because I didn't know this, and I feel like I'm a reasonably literate person. The NRA up until the 1970s, really through the 1970s, really was primarily focused on sporting, hunting, clay pigeons with grandpa, Boy Scout camps, and so on. And really, it was an insurgent wing within the NRA that took the organization over in the late 1970s and really shifted toward, in a literal coup, Nick. The annual convention for the NRA, and I describe all this in the book 5 Bullets, sort of what happens at they call it the revolt at Cincinnati, and the guys at the Cincinnati convention spent all night taking over the NRA's convention and moving them toward Second Amendment advocacy.
And they used the Getz story to
so a few years later, Getz was this high profile incident of an individual who, white guy, felt unsafe in a blue city, in a blue state with tough gun laws, had been denied a gun permit, paid his taxes, and voted. And they regarded all of those things as rounding out the perfect poster boy for the Second Amendment cause. Now, over time, they started to realize, wait a second, this guy's just legit weird, and he's not, and kind of racist, overtly racist. And we don't want him to be like, embrace him, but we embrace the cause of defending oneself against, oppressive thugs in a rough city.
And it worked, right? I mean, the NRA is a huge lobby. You saw Wayne LaPierre, he doesn't really apologize, right? It's not somebody that comes out after mass shootings and says, hey, it's the gun's fault. How did it really sort of cement the political influence of the NRA? Talk about
I think it was a step along the way. They weren't fully there yet, and they were actually reluctant to wade into advocacy. So, for instance, one of the scenes I document in the book 5 Bullets is this moment where they stage a press conference in New York City. And for the first time ever, the NRA has never done that. And a lot of the leadership in the organization just didn't like the idea of doing that. They felt like, what if it backfires? What if we end up giving our press conference to an empty room? What if we're advocating to these Democrats who are hostile to us? And they debated it, but ultimately did this pro Second Amendment press conference about a week after the Getz shooting. And that sort of turbocharged, additional support, newspaper ads, and so on for their next generation of work. And now here we are today, decades later, where no one would stop for a second and think, wait a second, was the NRA ever not a Second Amendment organization?
Ever present and ever the showman. Donald Trump, New York, resident. Did he make an appearance in this storyline at all?
It's interesting. It's the one above the fold New York City figure who really doesn't show up much in the book 5 Bullets. Yeah, and I was surprised at that. I was almost looking for it just because he was so ubiquitous. Now, he's well known. So the events of my book 5 Bullets take place in 1984 through 1987 is the bulk of the book. A few years after that is the Central Park 5 incident, in which 5 black and brown men were accused wrongly of a horrific sexual assault, an assault of a woman in Central Park. Well, Donald Trump at that point called for the death penalty for those guys. Puts a ad in the newspaper. He's just a real estate developer at this point. That's the big story, the big racially polarizing story that Donald Trump's really
that's why I bring that up, because of his, him taking out that full page ad on the on the Central Park 5. I wanted to see if there was any intersection here with this.
So, and I would have been stunned that he did not. I was stunned that I could not. And I feel like it's a pretty meticulously reported book.
I bet it is. It's you
on my back, right? But I could not find any instance of him really weighing in. The 2 or 3 references I make to Donald Trump in the book were about one in the gun chapter, in the Second Amendment chapter. This reference that a leader at the NRA used to me in saying, well, the kinds of people who got concealed carry permits in New York were folks like Donald Trump, rich people. Eleanor Roosevelt got a concealed carry permit, but he just used it as an emblematic example.
Sure.
And then Bernie Getz at the end of the book, when I interview him, he says that, well, the media has turned against me just like they turned against Donald Trump. He saw like a kinship with the constant sense of grievance that Donald Trump had.
One of the things that you said earlier was that this was a jumping off point for a lot of the people who are household names today. You talk about Al Sharpton. You talked about, some of the other people. If you could just sort of speak on that part of, this giving them their momentum to being who they are today, and how that shaped them.
Yeah, so let's go general and then specific. The general is just close your eyes, and anybody who's watching Nick Valencia News probably follows politics and can just think back to all the people who have come from New York City in the last 50 years to run for president of the United States. Now, most of them aren't serious or top tier candidates, but if you run down Giuliani, Bloomberg, de Blasio, Sharpton, John V. Lindsay in the 1970s, Hillary Clinton,
right?
Sorry?
Guardian Angels, right?
Guardian Angels, Curtis Sliwa, and many more. I mean, Zoran Mamdani, even if he hasn't run for president or isn't going to, literally before winning an election was on the cover of Time magazine. So that's what New York City really is on the national scale. So all of these guys, so Sharpton could use the case to bolster his profile. He started as a street level kind of agitator, activist, on up to being the Al Sharpton of today, the slimmed down, not 300 pounds, 3-piece suit wearing major television host. He had Sharpton. Giuliani was U.S. attorney at the time. Rupert Murdoch was growing his media empire, and this gave him a big story to latch onto. So all of these guys, and obviously Sliwa was part of Bernard Goetz's defense team. And so all of these guys sort of came through the story, and I used the book 5 Bullets to sort of chart how old is new, not just in concept, but literally many of the people shaping national policy in many ways today seem to come through this story.
Yeah, and you see this idea of self-defense continue to be a theme in today's culture, right? You have to show you that clip about people arming themselves. People are telling their loved ones, Second Amendment might be the only way to go. I want to pivot a little bit to your background. You used to work with the feds. So you were with DHS or you were with ICE?
I was with ICE. I was an assistant director at ICE for several years. Yeah.
So you see what's going on out there now, and you have a unique perspective. And I'd love to hear about it, what you think.
So here's the thing, and I will acknowledge, having worked for ICE under Obama as a political appointee, I'll be the first person to say and to note the criticism of the behavior, or not even of the behavior, of the performance, if you want to call it, of ICE and DHS under President Obama. I mean, when we're talking about the removal of 400,000 people a year, obviously that's a lot of people, right? That said, this is something different. And no matter what your views are or might be of how Obama conducted immigration enforcement, this is just different. And I actually trace it to one really big thing. And it's that what we had when I worked at ICE under Obama that's absent now is a critical Congress. Both when we started in 2009, Democrats controlled Congress and were incredibly critical about the agency, about how ICE was carrying out enforcement, how it was spending its money. And we would come up to testify in hearings, quite critical hearings, where Democrats were hammering the agency. In 2 years, in 2010, the election, Republicans took over and also continued hammering ICE quite aggressively. Now, that was a lot from the right, saying that ICE wasn't deporting enough people, was being too soft. But point being, lost from our world today is any sort of oversight from Congress, and whether it's from Democrats or Republicans, saying that what you are doing, no matter how the president ran for office, no matter what he claims he wanted to do, this is not what you're being paid to do, and you are exceeding the bounds of your authority. And it just is absent from the world in general, in every context, other than Jeffrey Epstein. Congress isn't giving Donald Trump really any critical eye, but this is a big one.
The mask is a big one to me in terms of how different it is. It reminds me of being in cartel country. I grew up as a journalist covering the cartels and would see police and Mexican feds in masks. And here now we're seeing the feds here on the streets. That didn't happen during Obama. Do you think there's merit at all to this idea that they're being doxxed?
I don't know. And it's so funny. I've even been reluctant to comment on the masks because I can't say for certainty whether agents were or were not ever masked for whatever reason in the early 2000s. Now, I have absolutely no reason, literally none, to believe that was the case, because I just, it would just be so remarkable, and it just head scratching. And the doxing thing, I mean, a lot of what the administration seems to be concerned about is protected First Amendment activity. Like, you're allowed to yell at immigration agents in your town if you don't like what they're doing. You're allowed to protest. You're just not allowed to commit a crime. And if you commit a crime and put their personal background information online or threaten them, of course, you can go to jail for that. But this idea that merely by being an ICE agent, they're all being doxxed and therefore they have to hide their faces is sort of ridiculous to me. It's just something that it's just, related point. And you and I are both men and don't think of the things that women think about every day. Think about women jogging, right? And the things they're told about, carry your keys or don't wear a ponytail. Literally live in a country now where it's just, a guy with a mask on who has no identifying information might just stop you and throw you in a van, and you just have to trust that he's a law enforcement officer. That is a bizarre place to be in the United States of America.
It's so bizarre. And it makes me think of the character in your book, Getz, and somebody who's going to take matters into their own hands and say, look, these illegals are taking our jobs. And, this is where I should be. This should be celebrated, this position where I'm at. And I'm going to use my gun on people who are ruining our country. It really makes me scared that there's going to be people like that out there. What about you?
It's really interesting. Two different people at least have said to me, you should either write an op-ed or just a point just to explore is ICE agents are the new vigilantes. And along the lines of what you're saying here. Now, I don't quite know how, one, I don't fully know if I agree with it. And two, I don't quite know how to sort of craft it. But the interesting argument is these people who feel empowered to go beyond the bounds of what the law says for them because they are fed a narrative that the country is a certain way. There's a little bit, if you squint, there's a little bit of an overlap there. The whole point of a vigilante is somebody who literally takes the law into his own hands. I just find it fascinating that two very different, not even crazy left-wing people said that to me independently, like when they knew I was writing a book about Bernie Getz, but also knew that I had somewhat of a background with ICE. And it's just a really interesting head-scratching moment. Wow, this is what people really think about what's going on now.
And people think they're untouchable, that these ICE agents, these suspected federal agents out there are untouchable. And I always say suspected because, we're putting it out there very fast. We can't verify it appears as though. And then I see this video in Holland, Michigan, Elliot, and it's like these bounty hunters, they have police vest jackets on, but they're not saying who they are when they're asked by the bystander recording. And now it's like, okay, this idea that they're ordering stuff off of Temu or Amazon to look like agents and then going out there, that's a concern. It's like, how many other Bernie Getzes out there are going to be taking matters into their own hands and trying to make the world a better place?
Look, an example I use in the book, 5 Bullets, is it's not, it's a few sentences in the book. Doesn't get a lot of airtime, but Kyle Rittenhouse during Black Lives Matters protest in Kenosha, Wisconsin, ultimately crossed state lines, but it's like the equivalent of going from Manhattan to Fort Lee or Weehawken in New Jersey. It's like just crossing the border. But okay, fine. He crosses state lines to go to this Black Lives Matter protest that he saw where there was violence, and he grabbed a weapon when he did. And what's just ultimately very fascinating about it is, what skin did he have in the game other than seeing images on social media of Kenosha burning? Why? Yes, it is important to keep our fellow citizens safe, and I'll even validate that some people may want to do that. But it's just fascinating that what compels you to go cross state lines to keep the peace, right? You're not a law enforcement officer. You're not a sworn agent. Of course, you might have had concern for your citizens, and that is itself a form of vigilantism. Even if he was lawfully protected in some of the actions he took, it's a vigilante act, right? I don't know.
And then I hear you say that, and I think, well, now these guys, they don't even have to be vigilantes. They can just go sign up and get a $200,000 salary and a $50,000 bonus with the feds, right? I mean, there's there's this opportunity now for people to be legitimized in their hunting of people. I mean, that's what I see. They're bounty hunters.
Yeah, and I would say
Obama, I mean, that's
no, not that I know of, certainly. Now, look, something I would say is that another problem is just how the standards have been lowered for who can even be an ICE agent. And they've made a point, I think, number one, changing the age requirement, and just getting people in the job very quickly who would not be qualified to serve in the role in any other universe. Well, number one, you got to be in shape to be a law enforcement officer of any kind. But number two, when the government is not equipped to do the task that you're seeking to do, which is deport hundreds of thousands of people, and you start putting in people who A, are unfit to do it, and B, are incentivized to do it in an aggressive manner, whether through pay or bonuses or whatever else, yes, you're going to start seeing some of the madness like we've been seeing, at least in some of what these images look like coming out of Minneapolis. And so it is somewhat of a crisis of the administration's own making. I don't know if they see it as a crisis, but it is kind of their own making, I think.
And, yes, you worked under Obama when he deported a lot of people, but they did it in not cruel way, right? Cruelty was not the point. It seems like this is the point of it all. Let's lose people. You started, we started this show talking about how Alligator Alcatraz is literally losing people and wrongfully, mistakenly deporting people to countries that, they're not being sent back home. They're just, they're not keeping track of people. It's chaos and cruelty. And this is different. That's what makes it different.
And I just think, and I don't want to, I with reluctance, I get into the Obama versus Trump, because there is much to criticize about how the Obama administration carried out immigration enforcement, did their best under the circumstances, but still deported a lot of people from the country. Now, that said, if any of this type of behavior, starting with the hiring standards, were ever exhibited at that point, Congress would have called the Secretary of Homeland Security and the Director of ICE and the head of the Border Patrol to Congress for a hearing tomorrow to explain some of these answers and start holding up salaries and start really punishing the agency. You got to just trust me on this. It just would not have happened. It's just, we live in such a different world with how the different branches of government interact with each other than we would have seen even 5 years, but definitely 15 or 20 years ago when all of this was going on sort of the first time.
So it's such a different world. And the last question I want to talk about is your book. Is there anything that you want to be asked about your book? Or you talked about living through this era and learning, being surprised about Trump not making more of an appearance. Is there anything else that was surprising to you? Take some time here to talk about.
Yeah, I think how measured Al Sharpton continues to have surprised me. I spoke to him and emailed him a little bit afterward. I think everyone of the era would have expected Reverend Al to be sort of this advocate forcefully for these young men. Even overweight tracksuit process hair Al Sharpton really was quite measured in saying, this is not about these young men. This is about justice and what's right for Bernard Goetz. If those men committed crimes, they should go to jail too. But this is about Bernard Goetz. Let's stop focusing on how bad the guys might have been before they got on the train, right? So that's the big one. And then broadly speaking, I just feel like every story is far more complex than we allow it to be, particularly in the age of Instagram and Twitter and so on. And what I used the book Five Bullets to do was really explore some of the complexities of all of these people, both the victims and Getz himself. One of the best points that's been made about the book Five Bullets was in the review of it by the New Yorker, where he says that, I, in my rendering, don't make Bernard Getz come off sympathetic in any way, but he's at least three-dimensional. You get to know him, and that was very important to me journalistically. You are not, I think most readers are not going to like this guy when you read my book, but hearing his whole story and where it fit into the big, broader narrative of the relationship with these guys, with the subway, with crime and safety in the city, that's just all important to piece together.
I love it. Where can we get a copy of your book? Let's put that back up there on the screen, Eric, if we can. Five Bullets. Where can we get it?
Anywhere your books are sold. I mean, you can go to the Penguin Random House site for the book Five Bullets, but anywhere now it's in stores. Go to your local bookstore, pick it up. That'd be great.
Elliot Williams, congratulations on this book, man. Many more to come, I hope. And I'm so grateful to take some time with you, man, and hang out. It was so cool to see you again.
So you too. I'm so proud of you. It's so great seeing you shine in this forum. So, congrats and thanks for everything.
Hey, one day at a time, baby. Thank you so much, man. We'll talk to you next time. See you, Elliot. That was Elliot Williams, CNN legal analyst and author of Five Bullets. Man, it was so nice to see him. Good to catch up with him. We pivot now to John Arthur, our interview with John Arthur. And if you guys have been following along with what we've been doing and reporting, you know that we spent our time this past summer in Utah. We got there a week before school started, and we wanted to talk to people, teachers, to see what they were doing to prepare for this new world that they were entering in. Enter the stage, John Arthur, who was talking about just what he was going through to prepare. He had talked about what he went through at the end of last year and how students were coming in, putting their head down on their desk and had family members taken, the distraction that it was to just go and not know whether or not you were going to come back home to an empty house, or whether or not your parents were going to be there, or whether you yourself were going to be taken. John Arthur he has achieved a lot since we last talked to him. He's now he is the newest appointed representative of the state of Utah, and he has a big fight on his hands. We talked to him about the changes in the classroom and what it's like to be a member of this new club where there are certainly a lot of elite people, and he doesn't come from that kind of background. Here's our pre-recorded interview with John Arthur. Amazing here. I mean, dude, for you to call me amazing, I feel amazing. You're amazing.
I'm but a humble school teacher.
Dude, title change since the last time we saw you. You're representative now. You're state representative John Arthur. What does that feel like?
It feels incredible. When I was a kid, my mom and dad moved around a lot because my father was in the military, and my mom was a Korean immigrant. She never got to plant roots here in the United States until my father retired. And here in Utah, there's an area in the Salt Lake Valley called Conwood Heights. And when my mom and dad were finally able to plant their first roots together as a married couple, they did it in Conwood Heights. I went to middle school and high school there. And I moved back with my wife and girls about 4 years ago. And now I am the representative in our state legislature for the same community that helped raise me. It's an incredible feeling.
What a connection. And we have a video that I saw on your social media. I wanted to play it here for everybody. And
yeah, please.
I mean, you're so excited, and you clean up pretty damn well.
As the new kid, when everybody else knows each other and they're all friends.
Oh, is that it? Here, let's try it again.
My name is John Arthur.
Here we go.
I am the new representative for House District 41. Today was my first day here in the legislature, and I felt just like one of the 11 or 12-year-olds in my classroom, showing up on the first day of school as the new kid when everybody else knows each other and we're all friends.
So was it that weird to show up and hey, I'm the teacher. You might have heard of me. I was a former teacher of the year, but here you are. I see you guys all the time.
Yeah, you know what? I've been very active as an advocate for public education, for public workers. So I'm known by many on the Hill, and now to be a colleague with them, everyone's been incredibly warm and inviting from both sides of the aisle. But I am coming up there with a history of calling some people out for bills and policies that I've not been a fan of. Always respectfully. I always assume that my 5th and 6th graders will see anything that I post online or any work that I do as an advocate. So I always come right, but I do hold people to account and insist on better for my community. So it was fun to get up there as a colleague rather than just a guy that they've seen on the socials.
That's so beautiful that you even think about like I mean, I know you're always thinking about your students, but that you think of
Yeah.
them in terms of your political career. It's like, hey, I have kids that are looking up to me, and the kids are always
Hmm.
watching, right? And how I
Hmm.
carry
Yep.
myself is really going to be a reflection of what they see. One of the things I wanted to ask you, like you talked about these humble beginnings. You came out of nowhere. Politicians love talking about how humble they are. You're not a politician, though. You literally are somebody that just, I didn't know that you had this in you. And here you are, Representative John Arthur here now. So like,
See, no.
what's it like being around people that, come from these elite backgrounds, and here you are calling them peer and colleague?
Hmm. Well, I tell you, nothing keeps you more humble than being in an interview with like the Nick Valencia, and then all of a sudden,
Ah!
the announcement comes over the intercom saying, we're looking for Dom, and that I don't play at being humble. I'm a school teacher, man. I'm a public school teacher. I broke
Yeah.
my mom's heart to become a school teacher. She wanted me to be a doctor or a lawyer, like most immigrant parents, and I chose this path because I wanted to be of service. And hearing you call me a politician is like always going to be hard, brother, because
Yeah, sure.
I it's like I don't know if you remember Happy Gilmore, but
Yeah,
there's a
of
scene like
course.
he shows up at a tournament. He's like, "Hi, I'm Happy Gilmore. I'm a hockey player. I'm playing golf today." That's how I feel when I go to the legislature. Hi, I'm John Arthur. I'm a school teacher. I'm playing legislator today. But here in Utah, we have a citizen legislature. So the idea is we have a short, just crazy 45-day session, which I'll be going to next week. I'll be out of school with a long-term sub for 45 days, and all these other folks, farmers, ranchers, real estate developers, lawyers, folks like that will be coming up to the Capitol. And so when I look at these people, they are the chosen champions for their communities, and many of them come from very working class, humble backgrounds as well. And those who don't, those who are from more affluent backgrounds, or those who have been in the legislature for a long time, they're still just people, man. We're all just human beings who are trying to do, I think, our best to make life better for the people that are in our lives and in our communities. And I try to give everybody that grace. I hope they give it to me as well. And by and large, they absolutely have.
I know you're really, active and adamant about standing up for public workers. That's something that
Hmm.
you care about. I wanted to ask you about this here. I have Salt Lake Tribune here. Utah banned books. I mean, you're a teacher. You're now in this
Yeah.
legislature. They're going after material that, like, I mean, really? I mean, what's some of this stuff here? More book bans ushering in 2026. Wicked, The Life and Times of the Wicked Witch of the West. 19
Hmm.
minutes.
Yep.
I mean, the point of this article, of course, is just to sort of think about how ridiculous it is that they're going after things like
Yeah.
this. There are some other serious things. There is a serious issue with an attack on education. I believe that they're trying to dismantle education.
Hmm.
What's it like to look at that sort of serious stuff, and now you're going to potentially be able to make a difference legislatively?
It's amazing, brother. I
Yeah.
I remember when they passed the law a couple years ago that allowed for statewide banning of books. It was They set a threshold that in my mind is ridiculous. If three districts in the state of Utah ban the same book, then it gets banned statewide. We like to pride ourselves on local control, and this was the opposite of that. This is big government saying, if people disapprove of this in this district in southern Utah, in this rural district here, in this urban district, boom, it's gone.
That's crazy.
And I remember I recorded a couple of videos about that, posted on my socials, trying to educate the public, and I told everybody, call your representative, email your senator, get in touch with these people to insist that they vote no. And now I will get the chance to push the button that says no. And in
Mhm.
Utah, we have a super majority. So my button, yes or no, won't have as much impact as a member of the super majority. But as a Democrat, as a member of the minority caucus, I still get to build relationships and sway hopefully the minds and hearts of the people who are writing these bills, that are coming up with this legislation, and hopefully impress upon them that there are at least amendments that we can make that are reasonable, that are sensible, that look at this kind of thing and say, look at what's happening. Some of them started to realize that when the Bible got banned not too long ago in one of our school districts, under the same law, and there was a big to do, like, how could they ban the Bible? Well, it's sensitive materials, man. You look at some of those stories, they get a little spicy at times, and according to this statute that you wrote and passed, it runs into conflict. And there are conversations that need to happen before bills get passed that I feel like have not been happening enough, and I'm going to just do everything that I can to open up those lines of dialogue and push for common sense things that are going to make education better for kids and champion public education. Like you said, public
Yeah.
education is under attack, and here in Utah we see it with many of the same programs you see around the country, voucher programs, and an effort to privatize education and take funding away from our public schools. And I've pushed back in the streets, and now I get to do it in the people's house.
That's amazing, man. Yeah, and it can't be okay when they do it and a problem when we do it, right?
Yeah.
Like you're banning the Bible under the same act. That's what
Yeah.
a crazy anecdote. Yeah, it's just wild. You're halfway through the year. Talk about wild. And we met you right before the school year started. And so, I mean, I didn't even really introduce you. John Arthur, we profiled him in a piece that we did in one of our first original reports for Nick Valencia News. And we talked about, I mean, just how heavy of end of summer it was, because we were going into school under this atmosphere of a siege of America by immigration and customs enforcement. And your kids had experienced that at the end of last school semester.
Yeah.
Talk to me about, now we're 6 months in. What's it been like here in 2025 and 2026?
It's been really hard. There have been, especially when it comes to that topic of ICE raids, of immigration enforcement in beautifully diverse, culturally rich communities like the one I teach in, it's been a time where you'll have a good week, it'll feel like things are just normal. And then all of a sudden somebody sees an unmarked car or a few in the neighborhood, and a third of your class is now absent. Right? They're sheltering, they're hiding. Everyone's got this undertone of fear. There have been folks that I am personally connected to who have been detained and facing deportation procedures, and
How do the kids
it's
focus in that environment, in that atmosphere, when, just as things get normal, all of a sudden, hey, you're looking up in the sky. Is that a drone? Or you're looking up around you. Is that an unmarked vehicle? Are they going to stop me for my ID on the way home?
it's scary, man. And it's, in terms of how do they focus, it's a lot of me not just educating but distracting. I end up putting on more of a show than I probably have in a long time. I'm cracking more jokes. I'm just trying to bring more light to counterbalance this haze of fear and a sense that they are themselves resented by other people in this country. I've got students who are from Venezuela, Afghanistan, Colombia, students who have been told by the leaders of this country and the man at the top that they are not welcome. We've got Somali refugees. That's a big population here at our school. We've got a lot of young people whose entire community has been attacked.
And this is home to them, and you are their safety.
That's exactly
big
right.
responsibility.
That is, and I cherish that responsibility. I got into teaching not just to teach kids, but to train champions. That's why I tell kids every day on the first day of school, every year on the first day of school, I say, I don't teach kids, and my students will scream back, you train champions. And they need to be champions for themselves, their families, and their community. I tell them, I've got you. I will take care of you, and I'm going to give you tools that you can use to take care of yourselves, your family, and your community. You have voices that many of your parents don't have. You are bilingual in many ways that your parents are not. You need to be prepared to speak up in defense of yourselves and your people, because there will be folks out there who are going to come after you. And I wish that I could protect them and guard them from the adult nonsense that's happening out there. But there's no way to. So the thing I do is what I do every day. I just prepare kids to be successful.
And that's beautiful because they're kids and they only get one childhood, right? And you're seeing
Hmm.
trauma that's coming to them. And for some, the childhood trauma, we all talk about that. I just had a therapy appointment today. I mean, it's like,
Uh-huh.
this is the stuff that ends up impacting us later when we become adults and we can't resolve conflict well, or we have
Hmm.
outburst emotionally. And people are like, what's wrong with you? Oh, hey, 12 years ago, I watched my dad and mom get ripped from me, or I was constantly going to school in fear. It's just so wild, and it's so beautiful to see like people like you really matter. There's a
Hmm.
teacher here up the street at my daughter's school and son's school. It reminds me of you. You're like the glue that like gets, I mean, you get celebrated, but you really are the glue and the fabric of the community. You know, every place needs someone like you, John Arthur. With the few minutes I have left with you, anything that you'd like to say?
Well, I would just say that every place has more than enough folks who are ready and willing to step up, and especially if you go into public schools. Public schools are filled with people
Hmm.
who have decided to take a job where half of everybody quits in the first 5 years, and where you're underpaid, underappreciated, and yet you're going to do this work because you are big-hearted, you're a professional, and you care about uplifting and educating children. There, if you are looking for champions, if you're looking for people who are going to inspire you, just go to a public school, and especially go to Title I schools, right? Because
Hmm.
that's where you will find some of the grittiest and also the most excited and enthusiastic teachers. You'll find a lot who are hard, or who are hurting and going through hard times. They're hardened too, because we've been through stuff. But this is a time where we need to be uplifting educator voices and shining a light on educators, because this is a time where we are seeing the cost of not effectively educating people about civics, about civil rights, about our
Preach.
history, about social studies. We've had math and language arts and even science tested and prioritized for a long time, but we are paying the price for not centering civics and our understanding the story of us well enough to not make the same mistakes that were made in the past. And this is a time to call on teachers and push them into the forefront. I shouldn't be special as a teacher going in the legislature. There should be so many teachers in all of our state houses, in our federal house, and they should be writing the laws and leading the way, because they are bringing the right motives and the right information into those places.
Oh, that's beautiful, man. We should have put rep period John Arthur before your
Ah,
name. How
I
can
tell
we
you,
keep up with you, man?
it's cool, but I don't get any more chicken nuggets, or I don't, there's no one here is like giving me any special treatment for it. I'm just John Arthur, man.
Still who you were when we met you 6 months ago.
That's
How
right.
can we keep up with you? People want to follow you.
If you want to follow me, my handles on social media are the ninth Evermore, the number 9 Evermore. It's also the name of the YouTube channel where my students publish projects, short films that they do here in the classroom. So if you need a little dose of joy, you can go to my students page on YouTube, but then also you can come follow me. Again, I do everything with a fifth and sixth grade appropriate lens in mind. So
Well, with
just need a
that
little info. That's a good place to go.
I'm going to blame you for this phenomenon that we're seeing now all across the schools, because you were the very first person where I heard 6'7". I
You know what? Don't
swear
you
to
dare put
you,
that on me.
you were the
Don't
first
you dare.
person, bro. I saw it on your social media. He's TikTok famous. We didn't even talk about any of that stuff. He was former teacher of the year. And I was like, what's 6'7"? John Arthur's talking about like 3 or 4 months later. It took an entire semester before it got here to Atlanta. Okay, so blame John Arthur if you're tired of it, man.
No. I was responding to the times. It's like if you're the first one out there telling everybody there's a storm coming, and they say, you brought this upon us. Like, no, man, that 6'7" storm was already raging.
I'm
I
just a
was fighting
messenger.
back.
You're fighting. Okay.
I was just trying to like give it back to my students and get them to stop by just making them cringe so bad. and it has not worked. They will not let it go.
Dude, there's a class in my kid's school. They are not allowed to count to 10.
Yeah, right?
They banned it in second grade. I mean, it's real. It's
I
also,
tell you, today I had students tell me that the new thing is 4-1. Like 4-1, 4-1. I don't know.
okay.
But I'm just telling you right now, in like 3 months, you may
We
have
heard
a
it here
thing
first.
hitting at your house. Like 4-1 could be on its way.
Breaking news, always ahead of things. Representative John Arthur, I'm going to call you representative. Thank you
you
so much for taking the time with Nick Valencia Live. God bless you.
Thank you so much, man. God bless you.
Here is 4-1 just doesn't have the same hook as 6-7. You know, in my kids' class, they've in one of the classes next door, they have banned counting till 10 because the kids can't get past 6-7 without an episode of doing stuff. Anyway, that was John Arthur. Love John Arthur, man. Thank you so much. We're going to save the last few minutes of the show here for the Pew Research Center. We have a new public opinion poll out, a new article on trust in science. Let's put that up there, Eric, to showcase what we've got here. The Trump administration has reshaped federal science policy in the last year. It's reduced the number of research grants, cut the size of federal science and health workforce. And the administration has also shifted priorities away from climate change research. We have the author of this, Do Americans Think the Country is Losing or Gaining Ground in Science? Brian Kennedy with the Pew Research Center joins us now. Brian, thank you so much for taking the time with Nick Valencia Live. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Doing well, doing well. Let's get right into it. What really stood out for you, and how did you guys go about getting this research?
Well, yeah, I think as you highlighted on the opener, this is an interesting time to ask Americans how they think about science. So, I think for me, what stood out is one area of agreement between Republicans and Democrats, and then one area of disagreement. So
yeah, let's put that graph there if we can, Eric, the Dem versus Republican graph while Brian talks about it.
Yeah, the area of agreement, we can talk about that in a sec. The area of agreement I want to highlight is this shared value you see that Americans, whether you're Republican or Democrat, think it's important that we're a world leader in science. We've seen that consistently in our polls for the last few years when we've been asking that question. Where we see a disagreement is on how we're doing on that goal. So in this particular survey, 2/3 of Democrats told us that the U.S. is losing ground compared to other countries in science, compared to 1/3 of Republicans. Wow. So just going back to that 2/3 of Dems, and I'll get to this chart in a sec.
Okay.
That was 28 points higher than it was 2 years ago. So we saw a real difference in opinion on kind of our relative standing in science. Now, another area we see a disagreement in science, if we go back to that chart, right, is kind of the public-private role. And you see Republicans more open to a role for private companies in research or private companies driving scientific progress in this country. This is just one data point that shows that. The other data point that is striking to this chart, right, is just the difference between Democrats and Republicans and their views on scientific achievements on colleges and universities, right? You see this 7 and 10 Dems tell us that colleges and universities contribute at least quite a bit to scientific achievements in this country compared to 46% of reps. And, I think part of the context that's important to this specific finding is the broader disagreements we see between the two parties on higher education.
And is that, you hear it all the time. Democrats seem to celebrate our higher education a little bit more than Republicans. You hear this sort of woke ideology that's being spewed out in universities or concern from Democrats. As you were asking these questions to those that were part of this survey, did any of that come up specific to that point there?
I mean, it's hard to know what survey respondents are going to tell us. We provide them the answers and we didn't follow up here. Mm-hmm. I think I'd highlight another area of agreement. Yeah, we see that differences on college and universities. But one thing that struck me here too is you see large majorities of Democrats and Republicans tell us that government investments in science are worth it. Wow. And this is something we've seen for a number of years now in our surveys. Where they differ is they might be worth it, but Republicans are just less likely to see them as essential. They're more likely to say, hey, private companies can play a role here and drive scientific progress in this country.
That's fascinating. Also, maybe not so much surprising because you see conservatives tend to look at private companies like people and they celebrate that a little bit more. I also, looking at the graphs and reading this article, I wanted you to, sort of dig in on this black versus white difference in trust in science. Tell us about it, Brian.
Yeah. So for a number of years going up to the pandemic, what we found or what survey research found, is that white Americans were more confident in science than Black Americans. This was a consistent finding for a number of years. After the pandemic, right, so as this data shows, we found it in our surveys, others have found it too. You see it in that 2018 data point. And also early on, remember April 2020, right at the start of it, you see that difference. And then you see the difference we have a number of surveys, but we just showed 3 here since then, is pretty modest, if anything at all, right? White and Black Americans have similar levels of confidence in science, right?
And that's interesting because there's a big difference. Well, maybe, there is a difference. If you judge that, put that graph back up there between 2018 and 2025, you see white confidence 29, a great deal, 81, a fair amount, and Black 19, a great deal, 69, a fair amount. You go up there and compare that to October 2025. What do you think the difference was here? You see 77 and 75, those numbers kind of equal out here.
Yeah, so what's driving this here is white Republicans, and white Republicans specifically early on in this decade became far less confident in science. So if we just look at Democrats, you'll see the same type of differences among Democrats by race that we saw prior to the pandemic. But if we look at all Americans, those differences have largely, changed. They're similar now because of changes among white Republicans.
And white Republicans, this is the self-identifying white Republicans. You're not looking through. Yeah. Okay. Got it. The last thing I wanted to ask you, Brian, is something that stood out to me. It wasn't about journalism here. You're talking about trust in science. But when you look at the trust in professions, journalism is towards the bottom. If we could put that graph up here, you have scientists at the top, right? 28, a great deal, 77, a fair amount. And look all the way down there, just above elected officials and business leaders, you have journalists. Is this what people volunteered in terms of like their trust and mistrust, or was this given to them as an example? Tell us a little bit about this.
Yeah, so this is a series we asked about, the 8 different groups here. These are prominent groups in society, right? And we asked Americans, how much confidence do you have in them to act in the best interest of the public? And we asked them one at a time, and then they tell us a great deal, a fair amount, not too much, or none at all. So what I'll say about this question is, yes, you're right to note journalists are toward the bottom. That's a finding that's been pretty consistent going on ever since we've asked this question, almost a decade now, that journalists, business leaders, and elected officials rank toward the bottom, and scientists in the military tend to rank toward the top, right? And if we look at these groups on aggregate, kind of this decade, early on, 2020 to 2023, for all of them, confidence declined. Scientists, the military, all the way down to elected officials. The last couple of years, for all of them, they've either stayed about the same or actually gone up a little bit. So in some ways, confidence in all 8 seems to kind of track together.
There is a total loss in confidence in institutions altogether, it seems.
Yeah, I think the loss of institutions, right, a lot of research has been done. It tracks way back to the 70s, right, in which, that's when you start to see the loss of trust in government and other sorts of institutions. What's interesting about this particular moment for scientists, especially 2020, 2021, was a period of decline in confidence. And previous to that, we hadn't necessarily seen scientists as part of the broader decline in confidence or trust that we've seen across society going back decades now.
Well, we have scientists in my family, public health professionals, and we hope for them that people start trusting them more, because I know firsthand how hard they work. Brian Kennedy with the Pew Research Center. Anything that we want to be left with from you? Anything I wish, you wish I would have asked you? Things that you want to say? Here's your chance, man.
No, Nick, I think you covered pretty much everything in the report, or else I was able to fit it in somehow. So really appreciate you taking the time to have us.
Hey, I'm so grateful for this partnership we have with the Pew Research Center. You guys are smart, make us smarter, and educate our viewers, empower them with the information they need. Brian Kennedy, let's put that article up if we can. Back up real quick, Eric. We have, do Americans think the country is losing or gaining ground in science? Go check out that public opinion survey on the Pew Research Center website. Brian Kennedy, thank you so much for taking the time with Nick Valencia Live.
Thank you so much for having me.
You got it. We'll see you next time. And that's our show, guys. I wanted to make sure that we had, talk about sort of the trust in journalism here. I wanted to definitely get that in with the Pew Research Center, just because, I understand why. I understand why people have a mistrust in journalism. I was talking to somebody earlier today. I'm speaking at UGA later this week to a class on new media. And one of the things that you guys have heard me talk about here is that what I've seen in my decades of being a professional journalist in those network newsrooms is that it's not so much the bias of being a liberal, that certainly happens as well. I think the smarter that you are, the more liberal you are, the more well-read you are, the more liberal you are. What I found to be more pervasive than anything else, though, was the bias of elitism and this pipeline of people that come from these really polished pedigrees and these backgrounds where they're vacationing in the Alps, or they grew up going on vacations or have buildings named after them. I mean, I can go on and on about this. And what I really feel now is I feel at home. I feel that I can be exactly who I am. Like, I am dressed how I dress, right? This is probably how you'd see me walking out in the streets. Thank you guys to those who are saying hi and watching this stuff and, continuing to support and engage, like, share, subscribe. All that stuff helps us with the algorithm. But what really dawned on me was that this space of independent journalism is exactly what the country needs right now. When you have this loss and overall mistrust in the institution, when the institutions have been corrupted, even if the individuals have not, at the end of the day, those people, those rank and file, are making sure that they're staying within the margins so that they don't get out of line and catch the ire of their bosses. You work within the margins of what they give you. And so here, our margins are what we make them. Here, our margins are whatever we want. And when we get up in the morning, we get to decide what we're going to talk about and what we think is important. And I think there has been, frustration isn't the word, but in June, there seemed to be a real, people were locked in. People cared about what was happening on the streets. I took my phone out there. You know how the genesis of this platform started. We got millions of views right away out in the streets. And then things were sort of, active until there was something else to worry about, another shiny object that distracted us. And then so for the months in between June, July, the summer, and up until about a month ago, there was some frustration, I guess, for me and my team here. It's like, why don't people care about this? This is the biggest story of our time. This is going to set up the way our country moves for the next 10, 15 years, how our kids grow up, the types of things that we think are normal and okay. And then the killing of Renee Good happened. And people came back to our platform. They returned and they saw the consistency. We have never wavered in our mission here and what we're focusing on and the attention we're trying to bring to this topic, Trump's mass deportation policy, a policy that we are against and a policy that we believe is harmful to this country. And I think a lot of you guys are starting to understand that and see that we struggle from a disease of individualism in this country. And until it impacts you, you don't care about it. It happens to me too. I get it. I'm not coming at you or anything. It's just what it is. The fact is that more and more people are starting to be impacted by this. You have Kristi Noem going out there on the Sunday breakfast show saying that every American should be ready to prove that they are American. You have masked agents who are out there on the streets refusing to identify themselves. You have parents who are telling stories thinking that their kids are being kidnapped. That was a link sent to me just before the show where a father saw men in plain clothes take his children and thought that they were being kidnapped. That's what's happening on the streets. Masked agents, heavily armed, treading on everybody that they go across. The assistant director of ICE saying that their targeted operations are basically anywhere that they're walking around. And if you come within their path, you may be subject to being targeted or asked if you are from this country. That's wrong. That's not okay. That's not freedom. That's not democracy. Being afraid to walk out your front door and wondering if you're going to be stopped and asked to prove that you belong here. Think about how backwards that is. Doesn't make sense to me. Other than if cruelty was the point, or to create chaos, or to get people normalized to the idea of seeing these heavily armed masked agents on the streets so that when November comes around and you go to the voting booth, it's already out there and it's not abnormal, but it's still some kind of voter suppression, whether you agree or not, whether you agree with that statement or not. This is not normal. And we're about to take you to Minneapolis in a couple of days to show you just how not normal it is. And we don't just want to go on the front lines out there outside the Whipple building and confront the federal agents there where that's been ground zero for activism. I used to live in Minneapolis. Some of you guys may know that, some of you guys may not, but in the summer of 2004, I lived in uptown Minneapolis, right there off of Hennepin, right there by the Chino Latino and the Imperial and Galactic Pizza and all those places. So I plan on going back to those places, going back to the Somali community where I used to go have lunch and interview some of those people inside those businesses. Some of you have asked me to go check out about these allegations of fraud that Nick Shirley claimed. And we intend to go back to those businesses, the learning centers that he showed up at during a holiday to claim that kids weren't there. Think about that. MAGA and those influencers and the alt-right are so good at taking a morsel of truth and making you believe that it speaks for the entirety of what's going on and having you subscribe to this black and white thinking, this idea of abstinence, and complete abandon, when life is really more of a prism of colors. We're trying to show you that here. We're trying to show you that, Martin Luther King's dream was still alive. It was just MLK Jr. Day. I was listening to that speech on the treadmill before showing up here. And this idea of his dream that we would be not judged by the color of our skin, but the content of our character, it's not a reality right now in 2026. You have cartoons, political cartoons that are being made public by his daughter, Bernice King, which show a cartoon from the days that Martin Luther King was alive. And it shows him saying, I'm about to lead another nonviolent protest. And it has a city that's in ruins behind him and a police officer there. So you think about that, how people were not celebrating him. He was one of the least liked people in America when he was alive. And now these same Republicans and conservatives, MAGA supporters of these deportation policies that are unlawful, in my opinion, are celebrating Martin Luther King on one day and then endorsing persecution the next. That's not okay. Federal holiday was on Monday. Most government employees took the day off, right? ICE, they were still out there on the streets. They got double pay. Thank you guys for watching, listening, liking, subscribing, all that stuff, man. This is a really important time in America for independent journalism, and we are that voice. On Thursday, I'll be speaking at the University of Georgia to a new media class, sharing what I've learned these last 6 months, and we really thank you for being here with us throughout this process. I'm Nick Valencia, host of Nick Valencia Live. Thank you to my executive producer, Eric Sandoval, my wife, and thank you guys for helping us make truth go viral. Got it out this time. As always, guys, have a great day on purpose. See you later.